Damanhur is really inspired by Atlantis. This has been, bringing back the wisdom of Atlantis has been very important for us. And so I just finished teaching an intense retreat in which we use some of the technologies that we believe was also known in Atlantis that we call Selfica, 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 that we have in the temples to help speed up some of the processes you were also talking about. So how can we quickly, instead of maybe spending 80 years meditating or doing practices that we do not have so much time, but how can we help people that are on a path of awakening reintegrate their energy bodies, rebalancing the inner energy systems of the body? They are much more complex than just the chakras. So bringing back the knowledge, but also with the practices that we have here. And this is done in Damanhur only at the moment, this particular process, because we need to use our temples.
That's great.
The temples of humankind.
I want to introduce you to everyone.
Yes.
Yes, right. We started
And
with
I do have an introduction. Well, first of all, I love
Yes.
Esperide. I have not seen you for many, many years, but I had some marvelous experiences and I can't wait to hear your presentation. But you are not, to me, you have an interesting background. You have a master's degree in literature and communication. And I think you were the publicist for Damanhur when the secret underground temples were being exposed, right?
So I wasn't at Damanhur at the time. So I have a master's degree from NYU. So I was living in New York and I just got back to Italy when I was asked by a friend that knew of Damanhur to come and meet the community. Just that at the time was, a community of healers, very, very simple to me, seemed spiritual people, but the temples were secret. But then 1 year later, when the police stormed the temples, because the temples had been built without building permit, and the police were convinced that this was a bad thing. So they had been trying to shut down the community for some time, but then they stormed the temples, and going out, the commander was in tears. And he said, "I'm so sorry. I had no idea what you were doing. This is a gift for humanity." So he said, "I'm not going to break the news to the press. Otherwise, if this comes from the police, you can imagine the titles, and it would be very difficult to legalize the temples." All that was lacking was a building permit, but it was kind of a big deal, or it turned into a big deal. And so they remembered me. I was living in Milan at the time, and I was invited to see the temple. So I was the first person in 1992. It was actually very close to the anniversary, because the 3rd of July of 1992 is when the police arrived. Yeah, it's like tomorrow. So we are speaking of this that is very close to our heart, that date. And so they asked me, and so I was the first person who was not a citizen of Damanhur at the time, nor a police, to enter the temples. So that was quite an extraordinary experience for me. And I decided to stay to help them and to understand who these people were. Why would people build something like that inside a mountain? Why were people so dedicated to something so impossible? Like these are 9 monumental rooms inside a mountain excavated by hand. So if you wanted to take a look at them, you can go online and Google the temples of humankind in Italy, and you'll see some photos that will give you an idea what I'm talking about. This is not a small room. This is not just a yurta. This is a huge complex inside a mountain with all different halls dedicated to the different aspects of our inner alchemy, our relationship with the divine. And now we have a completely new area that is dedicated to the wisdom of the indigenous people, to bring back fully our heritage and all the people that have been, holding the wisdom of the earth and bridging it with some of the knowledge or remembrance of the future that we believe we have as Damanhur. So Atlantis is a little bit the container for all of this, because we all come from there. And if we can change our relationship with time, and if we can change our relationship with the future timeline, we can also change the relationship with the past And so probably Atlantis will start to appear more and more on our timeline because it would be the one which we're on. So if in a certain way, Atlantis, of course, it's our past, but also it isn't. Meaning that unless we can get to the vibrational state in which we reconnect to the past, or it is not. It is and it is not. So when we talk about Atlantis, it's always a little bit paradoxical. We always have to think in terms that are non-linear.
Right. And I noticed that I'm still trying to get through your biography here, but I wanted to know you're the author of several books on spiritual philosophy, and your latest book is the 33 Lives from the Book of Time. So,
you see,
and I know that you wanted to talk a little bit about that as well. And also I want you to talk about that beautiful image behind you and how that came to be. So I know I want to ask you just a few questions to help you get started.
Perfect. Thank you. So you want me to take any of those questions? Or
yes, this is your time. And when you want me to show the art, I shall.
Okay. So our relationship with Atlantis, let's start from there. The relationship of Damanhur with Atlantis is a very old one. And the image that I have behind me has been painted in 1978 by a painter by the name of Dovilho Brero. He was, because he died some years ago, he was a painter of this region where we are, where Damanhur is, and he was a good friend of our founder, Falco. So now I'm going to go into total myth, sci-fi myth, but you were already talking about this thing, so I just speak as our myth has the story, and just feel if something resonates with you in that story. So our founder, who was a man, he used to say of himself, he also died 10 years ago, so he used to say of himself, I'm a man who remembers. And in this remembering, he was also able more and more to get to different reservoirs, to tap into different reservoirs of knowledge and information. And one way that he was doing that was also through dreaming. So in 1978, he started having a series of dreams that were indicating a specific place and a specific time. And these were recurring dreams. So he started to really understand that that's a message. They want me to go to a specific place and a specific time. And then the dreams became clearer, and it became apparent to him that they wanted to take him to Atlantis. So that there was something, some force, some intelligence, some being, they wanted him to go to this physical location, which still exists, it's here in Italy, because that would, at that time, that would become a portal to move across time and space. And he was also told or informed that he had to go through this physical door naked. So he couldn't bring anything. He couldn't bring a camera, he couldn't bring anything. So he thought, how can I make sure that I come back and I have something to show people where I'm going and that I'm not making this up? So he thought of inviting his friend, Dovilho, the painter. So the two of them went together to this appointment, and sure enough, the portal opened. It was a big rock in a place that still exists in Italy, and today it is called the Devil's Bridge. It's been called like this for many centuries because it's a place where there used to happen strange things all the time. So of course, when something's strange, people, at least in the past, this times of Catholicism here, thought maybe it's the devil doing these strange things. So this place, they go there, the portal opens, and they're transported to Atlantis. They're transported to Atlantis at the time that was right before the decadence of Atlantis. So the people that called them there, called them for two reasons. One, to start talking about Atlantis to everyone, and this was 1978, so this was not a topic that most people were discussing at the time. Now it's normal. We're here talking about this as if these were absolutely normal and accepted, but not at that time, and definitely not in Italy. And the second reason why was not only so that we could remember them, but we could understand what happened so that we would not make the same mistake. So I haven't been able to listen to all this to your discussions before because I was working, but from our perspective, and I'm going to say this in the simplest possible way, there are many more facets, but from our perspective, Atlantis ended due to two main factors. One was internal, so the actual decadence, the loss of values, and some of the things that started to be totally out of balance in Atlantis, with the majority of the people not being interested in spirituality anymore, but being interested in something completely different, that led also to a disconnect with nature, that led to unbalance in the psyche of many people, that led to many things that were not harmonious. And because of this, part of the planetary shield that for Atlantis was held by consciousness became weaker and weaker. So at the end, Atlantis was attacked by an external attack that sent meteorites that then created the tsunami and all the disasters that we know about. So it was these two factors. And why was Atlantis attacked? Because for thousands of years, when we talk about Atlantis, from our perspective, we're talking about civilization that lasted approximately 30,000 years. So it's a very long span of time. But for many of those years, many millennia, Atlantis was the capital, the reference point of the human empire in our galaxy, because it had reached such a high level of social, spiritual, human, cultural, artistic achievements that we became, the reference point. This is relevant for two reasons. One, because this is the reason why Atlantis was then attacked by other forces, other civilizations that wanted us, or at least the human soul expression on this planet that is now embodied by us here, not to be so powerful anymore. And so they took advantage of the fact that we already had lost a good part of our abilities. And also it's relevant because thanks to this fact, to the fact that Atlantis was the capital of the galaxy, that Atlantis reached such an incredible level of civilization, we believe that this is why we have in these times, which we're living now, which are very fluid times, where time is more malleable than in other epochs, we have the possibility of having another chance at collective awakening on our planet. So Falco and his friend were brought to Atlantis because this was the story that the Atlanteans, they received them, wanted to tell them, and wanted them to tell the world. So this that you see behind me is one of the paintings. And John, I don't know, darling, if you can put it on full screen. It would be if you can put on full screen just the photograph, maybe taking my photo, not this one, the one that I had behind me. Yes, this one. So this is a little cut to fit the screen. I don't know if there is any chance for the photo, but otherwise you can see here. This is a representation, a painting, so you can see the pixels of where they were brought. So Atlantis was a continent. There were many different regions. They were brought to what was at the time when they went the capital. The capital was called Atlan. And as you can see, it was made of different circles, concentric circles, with water in between one another. And each area, the more you went inside towards the center, the more was considered as sacred. And this was not flat, but it was built like, on a mountain. So as you were going towards the center, there would also be more and more elevation. So the citadel at the center was actually higher than all the rest. In Atlan, the city was divided in sections where there would be different guilds living. So, you could have the guild of poets, the guild of priests, the guild of artists, whatever they were, but they would live in a specific sector according to what they were doing. And at the very center, all the buildings there were made of a metal, of which we have lost the formula of this alloy that, from what we know, was called auricalc. And this was because you can see behind, there were very high mountains and there was a lot of wind. So this metal was this alloy, and the many, many domes that were there were built in a way that there would always be sound. So that people, energy centers, could always be tuned, could always be aligned, could always be refreshed and cleansed by the wonderful sounds that were constantly playing in the capital. We also know that, unfortunately, when Atlantis reached its decadence, well, then sound was used for the opposite reason. So it was used to control the way people were feeling. And this is an interesting reflection for us today also, how important it is that we bring back the deep esoteric knowledge about the power of sound, and how we also pay attention to not exposing ourselves and the young generations too much to those sounds that, instead of helping our chakras align and tune, they actually, you know, I don't want to say destroy, is too strong a word, but yeah, they disrupt the right alignment of these very important energy centers. And when this is done, when we're very young, it becomes more and more difficult to actually then reach a healthy development of our energy centers, and therefore the integration of the masculine, the feminine within us, and the possibility of becoming this complete human being, that we need to create this sacred wedding inside of us for alignment. So what you're seeing here again, I say it again, this is the central part of the city of Atlantis, which was at the time which Falco and this painter went to Atlantis through this natural time door, was the capital, and that is where they were received. We have many of these paintings. I'm not going to show them all to you now, but this is something that, John, we can do in a different time, in a class, or if you come to Damanhur, this is knowledge that we like to share, and we also like to use these images to help everyone remember, right? So as you have it on the screen, see if, you know, if this image resonates with you, what attracts your attention, if you've been there already, and if you've been there already, where have you been? What were you doing? You know, just using these images and this time also for this, for your own process.
So you mentioned something that people were kind of had different skills, or they were in different, I forget what you call it, because I know you do that in Damanhur today, and I thought maybe you could talk about that a little bit. Certain paths that people follow.
Yes, so the way we are structuring Damanhur, we have an initiation school. And the initiation school is the energetic plug for everyone, is where we share the knowledge that, you know, everyone needs to have to start understanding reality from our perspective and growing. But then we're all different. So the way we decide to apply our spiritual gifts, how we wanted to develop ourselves spiritually, is different from each person, right? If we want to get to the same destination, but because we're all different, then we all need different paths. You can't take different people to the same destination on the same path, because for some it would work, but for others it would not work. And this would not be respectful of the diversity of each person. So we have different groups that we call paths or ways in which people can express their talents spiritually and practically. So we have, for instance, the way of healers, of healing and healers. We have the way of the artists. We have the way of what it's called the alchemical union. We have the way of the word, for people that want to use teaching, writing, media, theater as the way to develop their spiritual gifts. We have the way of the oracle, and the way of the monks and the nuns, that are the two ritual ways of people that are really interested in holding the ritual container for the whole of Damanhur, and also for all the people that are connected to us, or the work that we do for the planet. We have a way of people that are interested in a close connection with nature, and also specifically through agriculture. So each one can choose what they feel they resonate with most. We have another path which is connected to work. So people that feel my calling, my mission in my life is to really help others, help humanity awaken, help myself awaken through the intention, the passion, the commitment to my work, to whatever my profession is. But I thank you for asking me this question, because I want to read you a story about this. Not right now, before we say goodbye, but I want to read you a story about Atlantis, about a man in Atlantis that exemplifies this. So John, if you can please put me back on the screen for a second. Thank you, and yourself too. So I see you for a moment. Yeah, because I know I speak very fast and I give a lot of information. And maybe sometimes we just need to take, yes, a little breath. I cannot hear you.
I'm very happy to see you.
Thank you.
You're saying is bringing back memories for me, and one of the things that I have really learned from you is the sacredness of the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And you have done a lot of work in waking up the trees, and it's like one of your specialties. So I wonder if we can talk about that too.
Yes. Okay. So this requires a little bit of a premise, but it's nice. It connects also to what I did at COSM, what I was commenting on with Alan before. So at a certain point in our ritual work at Damanhur, we understood that the trees and nature are a fundamental part of our soul. It's not that they're something separate. There is a part of the human soul, and by human, I don't mean the body. I really mean that matrix, the dimension, the spiritual dimension where we come from, and then we get crystallized in the body, but this is not what we are. So the soul is the higher spiritual dimension where we really exist. So in that dimension, the consciousness of trees is a part of our soul. We are one with the trees. And of course, if we look at the ancient civilizations on our planet, from the Celts to, you know, all over the world, the Maori, everywhere you look on our planets, you find myths, stories of deep communion with trees, including sacred marriages with trees, or all the way to the Romans, where marriages were celebrated under a tree. They were not marriages with the tree anymore, but some of that ancient memory was still there. So if you didn't have the tree as a witness, there could be no union. Trees in many cultures are where we know that the memories of our ancestors are held. And, you know, Avatar, the first movie, represented that so well, with that tree that had all the voices of the ancestors. These are memories that are coming back. And when millions of people watch that movie, hopefully some of that memory comes back. We are not separate from the trees, we're one with the trees. It is also true that as humans in the last at least a few thousands of years, what we've been doing to trees has not been very nice. We've been cutting down forests. We've been cutting down all the ancient trees. When we look around us, most of the trees that we look at now are landscaped. That means there is some humans that decided, oh, that willow would look really nice near to that birch, and somebody planted them. This was not the original matrix of nature, right? We are constantly intervening. On a one way, it's beautiful when we take care of nature, but it's not so beautiful when we forget that we are completely disconnecting from nature. We need to find a balance. So we realized that it was necessary for us as humans, and we did it as Damanhurians, as representatives also of the Western civilization that is the one that has caused most damage to the planet, because this was definitely not the indigenous people doing this, cutting all the trees. We did this. And so we devised a very simple ritual ceremonial way connected to Selfika. And we talk about Selfika because Selfika is a science that we believe comes from Atlantis, so it's all connected. But to create a sort of energetic mycelium so that the trees could start to reconnect, even though we've cut the natural mycelium connection by cutting the trees, the roots of so many trees. So originally, our planet was a planet where all the trees were constantly communicating with one another across the planet, except for water, but water also, there's water vegetation. So the transmission of the signal would continue. But we have destroyed this, putting concrete everywhere, putting cities, cutting the trees, and looking around us, and we have trees that are adolescent trees. They're not ancient trees, they're very few wise trees. So as humans, we've lost the possibility of having a relationship with the real archetype of what a tree is, which for us humans, the trees are our elders. So we cut down our elders, we cut a part of our soul, and we are surrounded by children, adolescent trees. They're also trying to figure out, how do we live on this planet with so much separation? So this ritual movement that we organized all over planet Earth was to say, let's go to the trees, let's show them that are humans, they are awakening to the realization that you're a part of our soul, and let's ask them if they're willing to reconnect energetically so that we can reconnect, help them reconnect their consciousness fully. This is what I walked around thousands of trees on many continents. Yes. Now I'm doing a little less, but I still do it. But now we have literally millions of trees that we say oriented, meaning reoriented through these energetic myceliums to reconnect to one another. And again, when I look around and I see what's happening, there's so much resurgence now in the interest of the connection with trees. So I like to say, this is how we feel the role of Damanhur is, to do that first magical spark that then can bring things back into consciousness. And then there are people that do those things even better than we do. But we open the field, we open the consciousness of that possibility or that need. For instance, I would say now in the temples, we have a beautiful hall dedicated to the wisdom of the indigenous people. And our dream for the future is to actually create a very large temple all dedicated to them. And we started a few years ago inviting shamans from different traditions to come here. And we have a beautiful spiral with thousands of crystals on it. And we invite them to walk the spiral while performing a ceremony of their choosing. And very often, shamans choose to sing, which again is so beautiful, this understanding how important sound is for us. Very often they choose to sing their songs, and then they choose one of these crystals, they touch the crystal, and they infuse the crystal with the wisdom, the history, the value of their people. So then we use the energies of our temples to broadcast this around the world. And again, I can see that since we started this, I'm seeing so much happening in the field of the transmission of indigenous knowledge, so much like never before. So there are people doing this like on the physical plane, like taking the shamans around, asking them to do ceremonies for people. This is not what we do. We ask the shamans, do a ceremony for you so that your value can be put here in our temples, and we use the temples as an engine, as a motor to spread it. And of course, the trees are part of this mechanism of the transmission around the planet. So I know I'm saying things are complex, but I like to show how everything is interconnected. And maybe this is one of the unique characteristics of Damanhur, But how many different levels? We always try to look at things and how many of these levels can we integrate so that whatever we do really has an effect, has positive ripples along the times of line, the lines of time, no, the lines of the times of lines.
Timelines.
This is the lines of time, and then we can reconnect to that past in which Atlantis is our past, because then we have enough depth, enough push towards a different line in the future.
Well, so let's talk about the temples of humankind then.
Yes.
And how Damanhur has kind of incorporated a lot of what Atlantis has done into our modern day world.
Yes. So the temples of, so let's connect this to Atlantis.
Right.
When Atlantis ended, before it ended, the groups of people that had wisdom, and this is, I hear this being talked about by many, so this is not a unique Damanhurian insight, but people that had wisdom took the children and took other people with this wisdom and left Atlantis before the destruction of the main continent, which had several phases, but they basically left with the children and they went to create the colonies. So when we hear, for instance, in the dialogues of Plato, Solon talking to the Egyptian priest about Atlantis also in Greece, we're already talking about the colonies of Atlantis, not the main continent, which is a completely different story. Very interesting because connected to Atlantis, but it comes afterwards. So when these people fled from Atlantis, the main group, those that held most of the knowledge, went to Egypt and created the Egyptian civilization, which was, where most of the knowledge of Atlantis was kept alive. What was one of the main purposes of Atlantis, and why is Atlantis so important for us? Is because as they knew that they were ending, they created a plan for our return. They created a long-term plan so that we could be back here together. And we are convinced that this is the time in which most of us that we're meeting now and having these conversations and being really committed to awakening is because we were together before in Atlantis. And these times are crucial because it is the first time that after Atlantis, we're all together in the same time zone of planet Earth, that we can actually talk to each other and meet each other. But when the Atlanteans that held the knowledge fled and went to Egypt, this was the key thing that they had in mind. How do we create a technology that could help us reincarnate? So this is why Egypt has so much attention on the afterworld. It wasn't just for them, it was for all of us. It was a much greater project that, of course, also involved stellar civilizations, because Atlantis was founded by stellar people. It's not a civilization that started on planet Earth. It was created by different stellar people that came together and then created Atlantis. So already this was exceptional. They created something extraordinary based on the highest possible diversity. So that plan of continuous reincarnation through time within the container of different peoples is what was brought from Atlantis to Egypt. And the technologies of Egypt, the pyramids, and many other technologies were like antennas to help people orient along the paths of time. We needed something for our times too. And this is why in Damanhur we build the temples of humankind, which among many functions also have that of being this antenna, this beacon to help soul come to this time and unite together. So this is a very clear connection that we have with Atlantis in the purpose of why we build the temples. And also to be containers and points of connection with the new alliance with the divine planes that is happening in this epoch. One of the reasons why we can awaken now and we couldn't 200 years ago, or even 100 years ago or 30 years ago, is because now what is happening now is that there is a new, really the word alliance is the best word, like a new orientation of the divine planes the human plane, the divinity within us, all of us together towards evolution, towards becoming more and more aware of the fact that we are part of the absolute. Because even all the names of the gods that we use on our planet, they define one facet, one aspect of the absolute, but they're not the absolute. But if that level is not in harmony, we will keep seeing worse faults in the name of gods. My God is better than your God. We have to understand all of these divine vibrations are different facets of a level, then there are other levels, and everything is the absolute at different levels of awareness. And we as humans here, we are the smallest divinity, but yet we have the absolute in us. And why are we here? To give the absolute an experience from within form. The Atlantis at their peak had this very, very clear. So there was a constant identification of the divine within each one of us, the divine forces outside, and this great project of evolution of everything, all life together. One of the technologies that were used in Atlantis that we have recuperated in Damanhur is what we call Selfika. Technology, a spiritual technology for this, for the awakening, for becoming more conscious of this divine presence within. I hope I have enough light that you can see what I have here in my hands. This is called the sphere of self. This is a very old one. The ones that we make now are more compact, but I've been using this and having this for a long, long time. Yes, Selfika. Thank you, Colin, for writing Selfika. Selfika sounds Italian, but it is not Italian. It's actually a word in the Damanhurian sacred language. We believe that our sacred language comes from Atlantis. Of course, Atlantis, many peoples, many regions, different languages spoken every day. And there was a ritual language that was used for ritual, that was used for ceremony, that was used to connect to the divine. And this is what in Damanhur we call sacred language. Our temples have all been built using the geometries of the ideograms of the sacred language. Selfika in the Damanhurian sacred language means an intelligence inhabiting metal and connecting to different possibilities of time. So it means many things. It also means spiral because it's based on spiral, but spiral as the understanding of an intelligence, an energy that can expand through time in a different way than we can when we are localized inside the body. So Selfika is at the basis of the temples, and we also use it in our everyday life, like the jewelry that I'm wearing here. I hope you can see on screen. Can you see some of this golden circuitry here, or my pendant? This is really Atlantean style. So we have several groups of people that have been working and studying the fundamentals of Selfika, and over these 50 years developing it. So every time there is a Selfika tool or a Selfika piece of jewelry, what you see is this art circuitry meant to modulate these specific energies in a way that can interact with us. So we have some for healing functions, we have some to expand our faculties. For instance, one I'm very fond of is one for dreaming. And the purpose of that is not to help us remember our dreams, that happens sometimes with it, but mostly to make the veil between this state of when we're awake and that when we're dreaming thinner and thinner. Because one of the things that we lost with losing our faculties, also as a consequences of the fall of Atlantis, is that we have entered this state of separation, which we believe that we are functioning and present when we are awake, and then we go to bed and then we're off. This is one seamless reality. So we need to be able to start doing that again, to stitch the world of dreams where really the manifestation possibilities are, with the world of matter, where we have the action and the experience of that manifestation. So Selfika is used in Damanhur very, very widely. And again, you can Google and you'll find the information on our website, and also stores where you can order some to experiment with. The best way, though, again, is to come to Damanhur and have an experience with Selfica as an amplifier of consciousness, because that is very interesting. In Damanhur, we do not use plant medicine, but I know many people that do, and very often when I hear the stories of some of the experience that people have with plant ceremony and plant medicine, they're very similar to many experiences I've had with deep meditation with Selfica. So they take us to these planes of expansion where we feel one with the cosmos, when we start realizing the sacred geometry behind everything. And so I think it's very interesting to try and see also what we can do with this technology that we are convinced comes from Atlantis. I don't know if there's any question on the many things that I've said, or from you, or if anyone, I don't know how the format allows for questions.
We do have questions. Well, I will look and see questions, but I do want to comment about the Selfica and about the healing. So you're using ancient healing tools, and Selfica is part of that. And you have, I remember you have this chamber that you can be in, that I actually sent a dear friend over, remember him, Jimmy, who couldn't even walk 100 feet. I thought he was going to die. And I told him all about you and Damanhur, and he hopped on a plane like a few days later. And then I saw pictures of him walking for miles. And so how does that work when you're using the Selfica for healing? Because I'm assuming this is also ancient Atlantean technology.
Yeah, ancient Atlantean technology, of course, connected to the possibilities of today. So whenever we take a technology from another point, whether it's a point in time or a point in space, somewhere else, we then need to be able to reproduce the same results with the materials that we have here. So we know that we do not have all the alloys, the possibilities, and not even the consciousness that we had in Atlantis. Because when we're talking about intelligent technology, spiritual technology, there is a part of our consciousness that is very important in how much these instruments can work with us. It's the interface. We are the same thing. In that particular case of Serafino, Jim, when you came, he had a very serious heart condition, and we were able to work with Selfica because he was also so ready for a change. So his consciousness was ready. The body could make the transition because the Selfica gave to his body the information on how to restructure a correct way of his heart function. And he did that because Selfica works on time. So it works on time as synchronicity with the events that happen to us, but it can also work on the possible timelines of a specific organ. And I know that here we go into sci-fi, but as we have synchronicity and possibility for different events of us as a whole consciousness, also our organs have an intelligence of their own. They have a personality of their own. So you can also change the timeline of a specific organ. Of course, that requires that the whole of the person is integrated, willing, and ready. So it's always a combination. But Selfica gives the energy, gives the information to the body. Say, hey, remember, this is how you used to work. This is how you can work again. So this is the specific technology we use in that case. And then we use those chambers also, for instance, for rejuvenation. So we have a way to slow down the aging process. I do that, and I'm very satisfied with the results.
I can tell. And you have Selfica for your face. And when I went in the Selfica room, I don't know what you call it now, the healing room. I had a person who did biofeedback back in the States, and she said that she measured my biological age, and it was 10 years younger after being in the healing chambers. Yeah,
that's an interesting principle. For instance, how does that work? You know, we have our body you could have an organ in your body that is maybe more tired than another. So you could have an old liver and a much younger heart. But this creates an imbalance. So with the self-care, what we do again, we work with the time. We work with the time of the organs, rebalancing. So in a way that the whole body can rejuvenate, because it takes much less energy if all the organs are in harmony, instead of having to give a lot of attention just to your liver because it's so much older than the others. So by doing this, you realign the biological clock. You remind your body what it is to feel the flow of the life force, to feel rejuvenated. We give the body the energy, and then the body does it, because matter is intelligent, is just waiting for us to tell you what to do. But we forget that also matter is a divinity. Our body is just as divine as our soul, but we completely forget. And so then we let it go and it does what it wants. But when we start giving it instructions, we love, and then if we support the instruction, the love, with the consciousness of what we're doing, and with energy and a spiritual technology that helps us do that, then the results are really remarkable.
Well, I can attest to that, guys, just so you know. So tell us the other ways maybe that what you're doing today is connected to what we know about Atlantis. Are there other insights that you can give about that?
When you say you, what do you mean? You mean Damanhur? You mean Celtic, my work with Celtic? Well, what do you exactly mean, John? Because it's you.
Well, I don't know. It could be your timelines. So, for instance, I do remember in Damanhur that Falco used to talk about altering timelines.
Yeah.
And going back in time and altering timelines. And
well, more than it's not exactly altering timelines, but creating an alternative timeline so that we can have a more luminous, happier future. So basically, from Falco's perspective, from the perspective of the consciousness that he represented as a human being, so not him as a human being, but the consciousness that he was representing, that was, of course, the same consciousness always been coming to our planet, so connected to the idea of the solar logos, the sun as a spiritual being that informs life on Earth and connects us to the higher planes or the more advanced planets of the galaxy. So that kind of consciousness that some people call the Christ consciousness. We use different language, but it's the same thing, that direction of evolution. So from that perspective, our humanity on our planet was destined to be on a timeline that would lead to basically the human species losing all of our divine characteristics, losing consciousness, losing all the highest qualities that we have. And so him, like many other people, embodied that conscience, came at key points in time to create alternative timelines where that would not be the result. So Falco is one of, we know of the closest to us in time. There will be many others in the past, the Buddhas, the Christ, and Muhammad, and women, and many others of which we don't know the name, but they came to insert new ideas, new archetypes. And with an archetype, I mean a sort of a formula that then we can embody and turns into actions that change how we are. So very important for us in this epoch is the archetype of community. The realization that we are not going to awaken singularly, we are going to awake collectively. And when we embody this, when we feel this, then the way we act changes completely, because it's not about me and just my family. It's understanding that the only way I can still have a me and my family is when my family becomes much greater. And then I start thinking in terms of humanity. So creating an alternative timeline where our ending is not more and more fragmentation, more and more separation with each other as human, with planet Earth, with the trees, with the animals, with the minerals, with all the kingdoms that compose us. We are one with everything. But the more we forget that, the more we go towards a line of destruction. The more we remember, we reintegrate, we reconnect, the more we create a different timeline, so different from the one on which we're on, then the end results will be very different. When we create this different timeline towards the future, we also reconnect to the timeline in the past of the peak of Atlantis. We will be able to find fully that energy again, but we need to vibrate at the same level. Otherwise, many of us will keep hitting the part of the trauma, the part of the ending of Atlantis that we also have as humanity very deep in us. I mean, that has been the greatest trauma that we have had collectively. To see all the people we love die and knowing that we were responsible and we could not do anything. Realizing, oh my gosh, how much consciousness have we lost? And look at the consequences on the material plane. We're not just talking about this was a bad meditation, you know, oh, I didn't have a good it's a transcendent experience. No, we ended our civilization. So that's a big trauma that we're all carrying. But the more we raise our vibration, the more we can go beyond the wall of the trauma and go closer and closer to the heart of when we were in Atlantis as the most splendid civilization on this planet and many other planets. So as I know that my time is not much more.
We actually have another 19 minutes.
Oh, okay, I thought I was on the hour. So, okay, so there is time maybe for one or two questions, because at the end, I would like to leave you with this story, and I would like to explain to you what this story is. So, yes, so if you have another question, if anyone has a question.
Does anyone have any questions for Esperide? We will take them now. I think we're awing everybody with this wisdom and information. Do you want to show those other pictures you sent to me?
Okay, let's show the other one of Atlantis, please.
Okay.
It was the first one before this one.
Okay. Yes.
Yes. Okay, so what you see here, it's very interesting. So this is like a map of the continent of Atlantis. To the left, you see that, and you see where it says Atlanta, that circle is where we were before. So the city of Atlan. And you can see that there are many different sections there with different names. Yes, right. So they're all marked by, there was a very high mountain range at the center. So there was basically no space for agriculture there. And most of the agriculture was either underwater or underground, or even more on satellites around our planet. So the level of advancement of Atlantis is something we can't even fathom. And this is what you see on the left. On the right, it's very interesting. You see all those different geometrical forms. They all represent different cities. So for the Atlanteans, the city was the most sacred place. The cities were always based on sacred geometry because their function was to help human communities integrate, evolve, elevate. So you needed to be within a very precise pattern so that your cells could be informed, and then also your behavior, so your thoughts would be informed with that frequency. The one that we saw before a detail of is the one at the bottom to the right. So there you see, yes. So that's the city of Atlan. And what we saw in the previous painting was just a part of the inner circles, but you can see it was much larger. There are a few capitals on our planet today that have been built by Freemasons and that have this shape, a round shape with water canals. And maybe you can think of some.
I have read, there's a lot of talk of what was the ancient star forts that were kind of like this one in the center here, and that brought in energy from the sun and sound through the sound and the energy of the sun that actually provided electricity, sound, and healing to all the people. So I'm wondering if these cities then were designed to uplift and harmonize people very specifically. And
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And as I, before, when we looked at the center, in the photos at the center, there were all these domes made with this metal called orichalc, on which we don't know the alloy now anymore, but there was a specific metal that was based on gold and other metals. So the frequency, the light, and the frequency of the inner circle of the city, which was where the temples, the universities, the places where people would meet, was all really informed, aligned, and kept coherent by this specific vibration. So that is the city of Atlantis. If you go up, you see the city of Selena, which is the shape of the moon. So the city of Selena was, as Atlantis was dedicated to the sun energy, the city of Selena was dedicated to the moon. And it was always throughout the ages a matriarchal city. We know that the government of Atlantis changed many times over those millennia. So there were many, but there was always a council of princes or princesses of, the different representatives of the different cities. There was always a council guiding the peoples of Atlantis. And then you can see other cities. You see the different symbols there. You can also see there is that symbol that is known mostly as the Star of David, but this is a very important symbol in all the esoteric, magical, mystical traditions, the symbol of union, the union of the upper planes with the lower planes, or the upper triad with the lower triad. And so this is a symbol of union between the human and the divine. And you can see all the other differences. You can see there is a key of Isis, the key of life already there. On the right, you can see a symbol of the trident. So this is a representation also connected to Poseidon. This symbol went to the Greeks, then went to the Romans, and Poseidon, as the god of the oceans, was one of the main divine forces of Atlantis, because Atlantis was in the middle of the ocean. So the main continent, from what we know, we understand, was more or less in the area where Cuba is today. In that area, that's where the main continent was. So when Atlantis was destroyed, many of the people of Atlantis, they could not take off in spaceships. They did not go to Egypt or create colonies to hold all the knowledge, but they fled. They moved to the coasts of Central and South America. So in the Mayan, Aztec iconographies, we see many things that remind us of Atlantis. Many, many, many things. But of course, they were all civilizations that started at the peak and then declined. And this is a puzzle when we talk about Egypt or Egyptologists. They cannot explain how is it possible that we find a civilization that is at the peak at the beginning and then declines. You can accept that and understand that only if you understand that it comes from something before. And then little by little, you lose the access to the knowledge, to the technologies. There are invasions, other people come in, and that is just history. That's how it goes on this planet.
I like the way you say that. That's how it goes on this planet.
Yeah, for now.
Maybe on others. So one of the things that strikes me is how beautiful it is to look from above down. And I know if you're looking at our cities from above down, they look like computers. You just see electronics, and it's like a motherboard. If you're looking at cities with all of the steel buildings, you're not, and this is just a very different concept of having sacred cities built out of sacred, with the sacred geometry.
Yes, and if you think how important it was understood to be order meant as harmony, and you think of the modern megalopolis, you can imagine the impact that they have on our subtle bodies. Just being inside a geometry like that, it's our poor cells, the sacred geometry that we inherently have inside of us is constantly trying to keep, its shape when we are bombarded by all these disruptive stimuli.
So I'm
And if we
thinking
add to that, sorry,
Go
if we
ahead.
add to that the lack of vegetation, the lack of trees, the lack of exchange with all these different kingdoms of life that are inside of us, then we understand why we are so separate, but we also understand why we get so sick. So the first things that we can do is how can we create communities with more interaction with nature, with humans, with order, with beauty? And these are really the questions that we as humanity, or at least the awakening humanity, we have to ask ourselves. How much courage do we have, will, desire to go and leave, some of the spaces in which we're used to live in, to create something new, because we feel that that's the harmony we need around us to have once again harmony within us and with each other. So on this theme of the harmony, I would like to close my time. And then, darling, I will ask you to put another photo of mine, but later. Now I want to show first my book. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to read you a story, but this is my latest book. And it's called 33 Lives from the Book of Time. So this is a book on multiple lives. We used to think about past lives, but this is also an old model. But let's use this old model for a moment, just thinking of time as a line and not time as a continuous, as it really is. So I did for many years, and I'm still doing it, conducted special research along the timelines of people to go and find which of their past lives, past from the point of view of today, are relevant for them today. And as you know, John, because you did this with me, I've been teaching this for many, many, many years. In this book, I put 33 lives that I think are meaningful for all of us, to help us remember who we are. So the first life, it's interesting because it's actually of some extraterrestrial beings crashing with their spaceship in Central America. So you were talking about Mexico and seeing those vessels. So the first story, I think, is very connected to what you were saying. And these are beings that realize that they're not going to be able to go back to their planet. So they decide to stay on Earth, and they have to make some genetic modifications to their bodies to be able to stay here. And this triggers a new timeline of evolution for us, for the humans we are today. That's the first story. And then there are 32 more. And in each one of them, one of the key themes is love. But love not as a feeling only, love as this glue that keeps reality together. Doing this research, I also went to Atlantis. I also went to Lemuria. So what I like to do now in closing is to offer you a story from Atlantis. So this is a past life of someone, a living being of today. It's actually the story of a Damanhurian who's living today in the body of a person. And this was one of their past lives. And I want to read it to you because we always talk of Atlantis and speak of Atlantis as the continent, the big story, but there were people living there, right? We were living there as humans. Yet, at that time, our understanding of what it meant to be human, or what it meant to be in service of the whole, was very, very, very different than what we understand today. So this story is not the story of exactly an ordinary person in Atlantis. You hear it, but it's a story that I think will help many of you remember who we are, and also remember a different way of being human. So would you like to hear the story? And then at the end, we just say goodbye, okay? So I would invite everyone to hear this with your eyes closed, but please put on the screen just the image of Atlantis in case you want, because that also helps. One of the two, one of the one that you prefer, you choose it, Joan, and then you can look at this image if it helps you remember more, or just close your eyes? We cannot hear you. Okay, perfect. This is our temples of humankind. I love this. Is a wonderful photograph because these temples are our portal to Atlantis. So this is also perfect. So if you want, you can look at this photo. This is a temple called the Whole of the Earth, dedicated to our planet and our journey on our planet. So when you're ready, John, if you want, you can also close your video. So they just see the photo and you also go into this meditation as you listen to my voice. So the story is called A Poet in Atlantis, Creating Reality. Golden Age of Atlantis, about 23,000 years ago. All the records of our history are kept in the archives of my family. From the time when our ancestors left one of the central planets in the galaxy and arrived here, where we are today, in the heart of the most splendid civilization humans have ever created. Millennia have passed since the first arrival, but we're still recognizable by our long necks and the different shape of the front of our skulls. Our brains have more developed layers than most of the races that, like us, live on the central continent. From this come the psychic faculties that we all have in our family. We are one of the oldest and noblest families. And for us, nobility has two meanings: service and harmony. Many of us are legislators, royal advisors, consultants for great architectural works, musicians, and poets. We are present whenever higher order needs to be comprehended and advocated. Unlike other clans, in ours, men and women have the same opportunities, and the traits of the two genders are not always clearly distinguishable. This is the gift left by the original androgyny of our ancestors. In us, the masculine and feminine principles are both awakened and integrated. I was born in an area of beautiful gardens, close to the capital. That's where I grew up. We also own a palace in the inner circle, where we hold family gatherings during the great annual celebrations. Since my childhood, I've had access to the great temples where I am introduced to the ancient forces presiding over the proper unfolding of my life and mission. I am very sensitive and I experience a wider range of feelings than average. Due to the genetic predisposition and our role, all members of my family are allowed this amplitude of sensations by law. It has long been understood that well-guided emotions shape reality in a positive way, but when they're out of balance, they become powerful weapons, also against oneself. For this reason, in our harmonious civilization, only a few guilds can experience the full range of sensations, human and not only. Some guilds can also perceive the feelings of other beings and races, but only if this ability is in service to the growth of all. My training is devoted to all the arts, to the study of the history and customs, languages, social and physical structures of all the peoples of Atlantis and beyond. To serve harmony, it is necessary to understand the richness of diversity, divest oneself of all judgment, and seek the purity of essence. My life is dedicated to this task, and I'm proud of it. After completing my training, during my ritual of ignition, I wear the indigo silk robe indicating my caste and role. From that moment, I feel one with the life stream guiding our people to its final actualization. I choose the role of poet. This is an extremely important function because a poet writes and therefore creates history through beauty that becomes truth. Not only do I recount what happened, but I add emotional layers on top of each story to make it more real and therefore visible also to the gods. It is these forces that validate all events at the end of time, making our plane of reality true. We poets are the link between human vicissitudes and the dimension where events become real. Our attention increases the complexity of what we choose to include in the story of our time, so that events are oriented in the right direction. This is how the complex living system of the universe works. By saturating events where we find emotions and harmony, we guide our people towards an enlightened future. I perform many hours of practice in the arts of movement, breathing, and meditation. I often spend time in the gardens observing plants and especially insects. Their orbits hide universal secrets and patterns. I choose my every gesture. I select carefully every type of food and drink, every contact. My body is my laboratory. Through a correct relationship with my cells, I can arouse and distill in me the emotions I then transform into poetry. The word is the ultimate receptacle of my process of participation in life. The masculine and feminine sides are both active in me. They mix and alternate with emotional waves to guide me. In order to nourish the primeval power of the androgynous being within me, I have love relationships with men and women. They all belong to my guild, as the different frequency of any other human would contaminate energy reservoir and affect my health too. I deposit all my work at the house of history through an ancient ritual that transforms poetic sounds into words of power to summon the attention of higher forces. Every gesture has its rightful place. Everything is part of a great spiritual device that will lead us all to higher and higher levels of knowledge and wisdom. I have no doubt about this. I live a long life and carefully plan my return. I choose to reincarnate within the same family and record my memories in the central crystal of Atlantis. A part of me also remains in the crystal of the family palace, where all the lives of my lineage are intertwined. Scientists prepare emotional hormonal essences to give to my next me to accelerate the awakening of memories. I leave my body at the chosen time in the family palace. There is a great light around me. I become the harmony I have always served.
Oh my goodness, very profound. I become the harmony. Very beautiful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah. So how can people find you?
People can find me by writing to me, and my email is Esperide, my name that you can see there, at damanhur.org. Esperide@damanhur.org. And yeah, I don't know. Thank you. Esperide.org. That's my email. This book is on Amazon as an ebook. So for those who like ebook, it's very easy. You can find it very easily. 33 Lives of the Book of Time. And I'm very happy about this because this is 25 years of my personal work, and I feel it's a gift. It's a gift that for me to having been able to put these stories together. And then the second part is about brain science and quantum physics that help us understand how it is possible that we're living contemporaneously in different moments of time. Because I feel that if we can remember that we're time beings, again, we can change our personal timeline and most of all that of humanity in a much faster way with much more hope, power, and wisdom. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Joan, for giving me this opportunity. And I'm eagerly waiting for you.